Good evening, everyone. My name is Latanya Jones. I'm Director of External Affairs here at the New York City Department of Records and Information Services, DORS for short. DORS houses the city's municipal archives and library and is focused on fostering civic life by preserving and providing access to the historical and contemporary records of New York City government and its people. Thank you for joining us this evening for this special presentation, Saving Radio City Music Hall with Rosemary Novellino-Mearns. I'll quickly introduce tonight's speaker and then pass it to her to begin the presentation. Rosemary Novellino-Mearns is the author of Saving Radio City Music Hall, A Dancer's True Story. Her career began at the Radio City Music Hall Ballet Company, where she danced for 12 years and served as the company's dance captain. In 1978, after the announcement of the planned closure of the music hall, Rosemary formed the Showpeople's Committee to save Radio City Music Hall and led the fight to save the famed institution from demolition. Since retiring from dance, Rosemary has become a lyricist, working with her husband and composer and singer, William Mearns, who she met at Radio City. Together, they have written the score for Ebenezer, based on A Christmas Carol, A Patch of Life, based on Mrs. Wiggs of the Cabbage Patch, and The Haunted Bookshop. And now I'll turn over the presentation to Rosie.
That was the mighty Wurlitzer, direct from Radio City Music Hall, played by the wonderful Ray Bohr. Good evening. I am Rosemary Novellino-Mearns, otherwise known as Rosie, the author of the book that we will be discussing and the story I will be telling you. I want to thank Monica Murphy for inviting me to speak to you tonight, and her co-workers, Latanya, and Melissa. Everybody has been so wonderful, I can't tell you. And I want a special thank you to Linda Wyatt, my friend, who introduced us to Monica. Now, before we start, I want you to meet somebody very important in my life, my darling husband, Bill. When you hear this story, I want you to know that Bill and I went through all of this together, side by side. He's also responsible for putting together the visual part of this presentation. I think he did a fabulous job. And tonight he is my technical director. Come over and say hello, my darling. Okay. Are we ready, Maestro?
Ready to go.
Okay. Back in 1978, I led the fight to save Radio City Music Hall from possible demolition. This presentation is based on my book, Saving Radio City Music Hall, A Dancer's True Story. I grew up in a very pretty little town in New Jersey called Glen Rock. And we have a great big stupid rock in the middle of our town. And my dancing education was the next town over in Ridgewood, New Jersey. And my teacher and mentor was Irene Vokine. Now, Irene was part of the very famous Russian Vokine ballet family. The world-renowned choreographer Mikhail Vokine was her uncle. So she had very deep ballet roots. And all I wanted to do when I was a kid was be a ballet dancer. That was the most important thing in the world to me. And I was determined to make that dream come true. Now, Irene Vokine was a brutally strict teacher, but a wonderful teacher. I loved her very much. And when I left her studio, I was pretty much ready for the professional world because thanks to her, I had grown a very thick skin, and I was lucky enough to get into the ballet company at Radio City Music Hall when I was just 18. Now, I wonder how many of you know or remember that the music hall used to show first-run films. It was a fabulous place to see a movie. Now, before I tell you about this fantastic theater, I have to, and I want to make something perfectly clear. I have been doing this my whole professional life. I was in the ballet company. I was not a Rockette. We were two separate groups of dancers. The Rockettes were, and still are, the stars of Radio City Music Hall. And the ballet company, we kind of felt like stepchildren because no one even knew we existed. But an interesting piece of history. The Radio City Music Hall Ballet Company was the first permanent ballet company in this country. And I am very proud to be part of that history. Now, the music hall opened its doors for the very first time on December 27th, 1932, 93 years ago. It was 2 days after Christmas. It was a cold, wet, rainy, miserable night. But it was a big, splashy, formal affair, and everyone who was anyone was invited, including Amelia Earhart. The enormous theater was designed by Edward Durrell Stone, and the Art Deco interior was done by Donald Deskey, who was also responsible for the designs of most of the furnishings throughout the theater. Now, he also designed all the fixtures that you see. All of this awed the first nighters and all audiences since. The music hall was, and I am thrilled to say still is, an Art Deco palace. So let's go inside. I want to show her off. This is the lobby, otherwise known as the Grand Foyer. And it is the first room you see when you enter the theater. It's magnificent. That huge mural behind the grand staircase is titled The Eternal Quest for the Fountain of Youth. And it was painted by the very famous artist Ezra Winter. It is said to be the largest hand-painted, mural in all of New York City. Now, I'm going to tell you a secret about this room. Those large mirrors that go up 3 stories, well, those mirrors are backed with gold leaf, not silver. Most mirrors are backed with silver leaf. And that was to ensure that a soft, warm glow fell over the guests. And it does. The lighting in that room is absolutely unique. And speaking of lighting, the chandeliers in the ground foyer are 29 feet long, and they weigh 4,000 pounds. Let's head down to the Grand Lounge. This is another one of Donald Deskey's designs, and it beckons you down a large curved staircase to the Grand Lounge, which is indeed grand in its Art Deco design. The ladies' rooms on every level look like something out of a Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers movie. And the men's lounge is on the lower level is sublime and is pure Art Deco artwork. This mural that hangs in the men's lounge on the lower lounge is actually titled Men Without Women. And it was done by the artist Stuart Davis. And as you can see, there's a pipe and a barber pole and a razor, all that stuff you guys do without us. Now, exhibited throughout the lobbies are several sculptures that were commissioned just for the music hall. This is one of the famous statues, and it's titled The Dancing Girl. It was done by the artist Robert Laurent. And there's a very famous statue, usually in the Grand Lounge downstairs. This one is titled The Spirit of Dance, and it was sculpted by the world-renowned sculptor William Zorich. Both of these sculptures are cast in aluminum. Now, there were a few women that were part of the design team. I'm only going to talk about the 2 most famous. The first was Ruth Reeves. She was a textile designer, And she was into Cubism. And she designed the wall coverings in the auditorium, and she titled them The History of the Theater. She also designed the carpets in the lobby and the grand staircase, and she titled that Still Life with Musical Instruments. Now, the other woman was Hildreth Mier. She was an American sculptor and mosaicist, and she designed 3 rondels representing dance, drama, and song. These are 18 feet in diameter. I'll let you wrap your head around the size of those. They're magnificent. And they can be seen on the outside wall of the theater on the 50th Street side. So if you're in New York, the next time you're standing there, look up, because these are beautiful. They were designed by Hildreth Mier, but they were executed by the artist Oscar Bach. Now, the concept of the theater was from S.L. Rothefeld, otherwise known as Roxy. And he had another great big gorgeous theater exactly 1 block away on the corner of 50th Street and 7th Avenue called the Roxy. But the Roxy showed movies and stage shows. And he wanted Radio City Music Hall to be the showplace of the nation. And his dream was to have only stage presentations, no films. Now, the interior of the theater held 6,200 seats without one obstructed view. And the reason there's no obstructed view is because that beautiful sunburst ceiling is completely suspended from above. The stage is called the Great Stage because Roxy envisioned not only an enormous space, but huge spectacular productions. Now, back to that grand opening in 1932. This is the original program from that opening night. And they had some very well-known performers in that show, including the vaudeville stars of the time. And among them that night were Ray Bolger, the Flying Wallendas. For culture, they had the Martha Graham Dance Company featuring Martha Graham herself. There were opera stars from all over the world. The newly formed Radio City Music Hall Ballet Company featuring the famous ballerina of the time, Patricia Bowman. And of course, that world-renowned dancing troupe, the Roxyettes. They were not known as the Rockettes till 1934. Now, this elaborate opening, unfortunately, was a complete bust. It started a half hour late and it ran over 4.5 hours. People were leaving. They couldn't take it anymore. And when Bill and I were researching to do this, we found a review in the New York Times. And the quote was, "This show does not provoke much enthusiasm, but the theater, ladies and gentlemen, the theater got rave reviews. Everybody loved it. And they had never seen anything like it." And the next morning in the New York Tribune, that quote was, "The least important item in last evening's event was the show itself. It has been said of the new musical that it needs no entertainers, that its beauty and comfort alone are sufficient to gratify the greediest of playgoers." Well, that's quite a review. So the board of directors, against Roxy's wishes, decided the only way for this newfangled music hall to survive would be to put movies along with the stage shows. So 2 weeks later, on January 11th, 1933, the first film, The Bitter Tea of General Yen, starring Barbara Stanwyck, was shown, and the music hall became the most famous movie palace in the world. They would show movies and stage shows all day long. The movie played 5 times a day, and the shows were done 4 times a day. And in its heyday, if a movie played the musical, it was instantly considered a surefire hit. That's the kind of reputation it had. Producers would fight to get their films into this theater. And when you look at the list of classic films that opened at the musical, it's mind-blowing. There were over 100 world premieres. Just look at these films. Every one of them was a hit. Now, whenever a film changed, the show changed. And for the first 2 years of the theater's life, the films that went in there only lasted 1 to 2 weeks. I don't know how they did that for 2 years. And all the years I worked there, we had 1 2-weeker, and it was really difficult. Now, believe it or not, the first film to break all records and run 5 long weeks was none other than Walt Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And that opened in 1938. Now, by the 1940s, the average run of a film was between 3 to 6 weeks. Of course, it all depended on the success of the film. Rehearsals would start 2 weeks before the film changed. And we would rehearse the show while the movie was running. Up on the 8th floor, there were 2 rehearsal halls. One was very big and one was a little smaller, and sometimes we had to share with the Rockettes or singers or whatever. This is a shot in the rehearsal hall. I don't know how many of you would know this. That gentleman there in the front, that is Peter Gennaro, who was our choreographer, and I'm right behind Peter, facing my back to the wall. And whenever we did a stage rehearsal, they were really early in the morning. The theater always opened with a movie, except on Sunday. And the doors would open between 9 and 9:30, depending on the length of the movie. So we had to be done and off that stage by 9 a.m. So our calls were usually really early. They were like 5 in the morning. This is a full dress. There's Peter Gennaro again, standing next to me. This is a full dress rehearsal, makeup, everything. This picture was taken at 6:30 in the morning. Those were hard days because you still had 4 shows to do after you did the rehearsal. Oh, long days. Now the longest a film ever played when I worked there was way back in 1970. It was Airport. Oh my gosh, this was a mega hit. It was an Easter show, and it ran 12 long weeks. We thought we were on a holiday because we didn't have rehearsals for 3 months. Now, as I said earlier, I worked at the musical and I was in the ballet company. I worked there for 12 years. These are some rehearsal shots taken of me up on the 8th floor, and where everything was done. Those were those rehearsal halls I told you about. Everything was created up there, and then you would bring it down onto the stage. Now, the ballet company was very versatile. We did everything from classical ballet on point to jazz and character numbers. That's not happening anymore. I can't believe that's me. And then when Peter Gennaro, I keep talking about Peter, but he was important in our lives in that period. When Peter Gennaro came in, we did a lot of musical theater numbers. Peter was famous for television choreography and Broadway. And it was great fun to work for him. He was a wonderful, talented man, and he was one of the nicest guys that ever worked at the music hall. And after I was there about 5 years, I was asked to become dance captain. And this is a shot in the ballet office. It was this little office. It was one flight above the dressing room, so you could throw on a robe and run upstairs and work on payroll. And sadly, in 1974, the music hall decided to cut costs, and they eliminated the ballet as a permanent group, and we were all let go. And I thought my world had ended. I loved working there. And we all scattered, and luckily, I think all of us got jobs and other shows. And about 6 months later, Peter Gennaro again, he was getting ready to do his Easter show. And Peter wanted another group of dancers besides just the Rockettes. And so the musical held an audition. And it felt like every dancer in New York showed up, including all of us. And what they did, they hired about half of us back, and then they hired some new people. But when we came back this time, we weren't permanent. We were hired like the singers. We were hired per show whenever they felt they needed us. We worked almost all year long, but we didn't have that permanent status anymore. Only the Rockettes and the musicians had that. But when I came back this time was when I met my future husband, Bill. This is a true story. When the ballet was fired, Peter Gennaro hired Bill to be a soloist singer. And then I sauntered back in. And it is ironic to me that what I thought was the end of my world turned out to be the absolute best part of my world. And I mean that. And Bill and I got to work there together for another 5 years. I mean, talk about magic. You're doing what you love to do and you're falling in love with somebody at the same time. It was heaven. Okay, enough about romance. Here's a fact. With the exception of the Christmas show and the Easter show, and I say exception because those two shows always had a built-in audience. At Christmas time, everybody wanted to come and see the nativity. They still do, with the live animals, with the horses and the donkeys and the sheep and those nasty camels. Oh, they spit and they bite and they kick. Oh boy. Backstage with the camel is not fun. At Easter time, everybody wanted to come and see the Easter pageant. I don't know if you know this, but that set for the Easter pageant was designed by Vincent Minnelli. He started his career at the musical, as a lot of us did. But the rest of the year, it was the movie that got the people into those seats. And as you just saw, the films used to be top of the line. But somewhere in the mid-70s, the films started to get a little strange. And then they got downright bad. Any of you ever seen or heard the film Hennessy? Oh, you horrible. Or how about The Black Windmill? Doesn't that sound uplifting and fun? Or The Bluebird? Not the cute one with Shirley Temple. No, 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 no. The horrible one that poor Elizabeth Taylor got roped into starring in. These movies were really bad. And when I was doing the book, my publisher said, Rosie, you've got to put quotes from these reviews in here or everybody's going to think it's your opinion. And of course he was right. And when Bill and I were looking up these reviews, we had forgotten just how bad these reviews were. And I know tonight we have former Rockettes watching. We have ushers. We have a lot of people that work there, ballet dancers. I'm so glad you're watching, guys. And all of us remember, there were times when that great big beautiful gold curtain would go up and there were more of us on stage than in that audience. Look at the size of that audience. Talk about depressing. And we were all backstage in our dressing rooms going, what are they doing? What is going on? We knew blockbusters were opening all over the city, but they weren't getting booked into the music hall. And then during the Christmas show of 1977-78, this happened.
At a better time, it brought so much glitter and entertainment into the lives of millions of New Yorkers in the depths of the Great Depression. And after all these years, there was a sad announcement about that music hall today.
I'm announcing the closing of Radio City Music Hall at the end of the 1978 Easter show on April 12th.
There was no last-minute reprieve this time. Last year, employees took a pay cut to keep Radio City open, but nothing could save it this time.
I've worked my ass off for 5 years to keep this theater open. And we have a number of corporations for which I'm responsible, and I put more time on this corporation than I have all of the others put together. And it's, no one wants to shoot Santa Claus.
One final question. Is there any chance the music hall will stay open?
No.
Really? Bill and I were at that news conference because the night before this happened, during the third break before our last show, we were all in our dressing rooms, and the backstage announcement came on backstage by the stage manager. And it said, all captains and heads of departments, please report to John Jackson's office immediately. John Jackson was one of the vice presidents. And I was in my dressing room. I think I was doing my nails or something. And I looked at everybody and said, what's going on? And I called Bill in his dressing room, and, he said, I'll meet you on the stairs. And I went down. His dressing room was below ours. And then we went down, and we're crossing the stage, and we bump into Will Irwin, who is the conductor, head of the musical department. And we bump into Violet Holmes, who is head of the Rockettes. And we're going, what's going on? And we go into his office. It was on 51st Street side. Small office. Now there's a lot of people in there. And he was sitting in a big leather chair, and he had a very, very deep voice. And he said, you're invited to attend an early morning news conference tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, and you can tell your staff. Period. And of course, then all of us go, whoa, what's it about? What's it about? And he said, that's all I can tell you. And we were ushered out of his office. And I remember a group of us was right outside the door of his office. I think it was Will Irwin, Bill, myself, and Violet going, what? And we went back to our dressing rooms. And I remember telling the ballet people about this. And the tension in the dressing room went from 0 to about 6,000. I've never seen anything like that. It was just like, and everybody was all upset and angry, and all kinds of horrible words were being spewed out of their mouths. And they all said, I'm not going. And Bill and I decided we had to go since we were captains. So the next morning we went, and we stood there and listened to him say that. Felt like we had been punched in the stomach. We didn't know what to do because we were at the theater way too early to get ready. We were still doing the Christmas show, Jingle Bells, Jingle Bells. So we went back down to that little office of mine. And we just kept saying, how did this happen? How did they let this happen? The newspapers that morning stated that they were either going to tear the building down, or, are you ready? They were going to make it into an amusement park. That's just what we need in the middle of Manhattan, is amusement park. The whole city's an amusement park. And then they were going to, or make it into a shopping mall. We don't have enough stores in New York. Gosh, gee, we need a shopping mall, honestly. And then the best, those of you who were around back then will remember this name, Andrew Stein. He was the Manhattan Borough president at the time. And it was a headline, I still have it. And it said, Andrew Stein wants to turn Radio City Music Hall into the American Stock Exchange. What? We didn't know what to do. We didn't know who to believe, but we were encouraged when our mayor, Mayor Koch, said this.
New York City would be the poorer for the loss of the music hall. It is a question of a tourist attraction. It is one of our major tourist attractions, and so obviously if I'm interested in keeping business here and enhancing it, I want to keep as many of those tourist attractions open.
If they tore down that wonderful place, they would never build another theater with that fabulous Art Deco design. Wrong period, not going to happen. Or build a theater with the theatrical capabilities built into this stage. I'm going to show you some examples of what that stage can do. And please remember, this was built in 1932. The stage, which is 144 feet by 66.5 feet, which means big, was designed by Peter Clark. The stage is divided into 3 elevators. Each elevator, what is going on with my voice? Each elevator can go up or down 1 at a time, 2 at a time, or all 3 at a time. And it's all done with hydraulic lifts, just like an aircraft carrier. The orchestra pit also does the same. I love this picture. This is a shot of all 3 elevators down 2 stories. And you can get an idea of how large it is, and you don't even see the apron on the stage here. There's a turntable, the complete width of the stage. Now the turntable can go around, and while it's spinning, all 3 elevators can go up while it's turning. Same thing, can go around and all 3 elevators can descend while it's turning. I'm going to show you a very short clip of the turntable in use. This was the opening of one of the ballets I did there. And of course, the mighty Wurlitzer, which happens to be the world's largest theater organ in the world. And of course, it was designed specifically for this theater. I always call this picture the organ in its cubbyhole. When the organist sits down, they press a button on the left-hand side and the whole console comes out. It's on tracks. I'm sure you've all seen it if you've been to the hall. It comes out so you can see the organ and you can see the organist. And then when it's done, when they're finished, they press the button, it goes back and little gold curtains close. And I will tell you that this instrument is magnificent. When they play this, it shakes the rafters. And when you're brand new and you're in the dressing room and this plays, because the pipes go up the side of the building, go right up the dressing room walls. The first time you hear that in there, you hold on because you think it's an earthquake. You very quickly become used to it and you become very blasé about it. But the first time it's like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. It is powerful. It's very impressive. There is actually 2 consoles, one on either side of the stage, as you can see in this photograph. Now, this is a picture of the orchestra. Now, I told you the orchestra goes up and down by hydraulic lifts. The section they're sitting on, that brown section, that's called the band car. Well, in case you're confused by what I just said, I will explain. Band car, band as in musical band, car as in vehicle. They have the ability to raise the orchestra, if they want to, raise the orchestra to the level of the stage. And while the musicians are playing, without missing a beat, pun intended, the band car moves onto the stage. It's a wonderful effect. Every time they used it, the audience went insane, as well they should. And if we have time during Q&A, if you want to know, I will tell you the well-guarded secret of how that band car moves. It might make you laugh. There was a steam curtain. We don't have a picture of it, but it ran parallel to the footlights, and it would shoot up a whole wall of steam, a curtain of steam. And it was so intense that they could project film on it for special effects. That steam curtain was connected to New York City sewer steam system. 1932, they thought to put this in there. Above the steam curtain, a rain curtain. And when it rained on that stage, it rained hard, you got wet. I've been under the rain curtain. That was connected to New York Waterworks. How forward-thinking were these men to put all of this into this theater? It had its own costume department up on the 8th floor. This was right down the hall from the rehearsal studio. Around the corner from this, up a couple of steps, was a full hat department where they made all the hats, headpieces, and wigs. And in the basement of the theater was a full scenic studio. Everything was self-contained in this theater. Now, besides the ballet that you've heard an awful lot about tonight, there were the world-famous Rockettes. What would the music hall be without the Rockettes? And I know there's some watching tonight. Hi, guys. The Rockettes made the music hall famous. Music hall made the Rockettes famous. And they were all created by the brilliant choreographer, Russell Markert. The man was a genius. There was a chorus of singers. This is a shot of Bill on stage. I took this from the wings. This was our last Easter show together. There was a staff of 40 ushers, all in formal attire. And one of them is a dear friend. Frank Devlin is watching tonight. And he was also a very important part of our committee. And he's just got out of the hospital, and we hope you're feeling better, Frank. Got my pen on. Yeah. He gave me this pen. Love you, Frank. And when Bill and I worked there, and Frank, there was a full symphony orchestra. And Bill and I thought, this is all well worth fighting to save. And we're in that little office, and I kept saying to Bill, we have to do something. What are we going to do? I don't know what to do. I'm a ballet dancer. We were both upset, obviously. I was nervous. We were anxious. But I was mad. I was mad as a hornet. I loved that building. I loved every inch of that building. And I just kept pacing back and forth in that little office like a lioness in a cage. And I said, we have to do something. And I kept looking at the phone in the office. So I'm going to call somebody. And so, who are you going to call? I said, I don't know. And I looked at the window and I thought, NBC's literally right across the street. So I picked up the phone and I called NBC. I didn't know what I was going to say, but I thought something will guide me. And that phone call led to another phone call. And within an hour, I was booked to appear on a local TV show, the Bill Boggs Show, as long as I brought Rockettes. You have to bring Rockettes.
We have Rosemary Novellino here. Yes. Rosemary, where are you? She is a dance captain for the ballet. A welcome, please, for Rosemary Novellino. Hello? Hello. Where did you study, Rosemary?
Most of my studying was in New Jersey with Irene Vokeen, and then I also studied in the city with several major schools.
You've been dancing since you were how old?
3.5 years old.
What would you like to see happen to Radio City Music Hall now?
I would like to see Radio City remain as it is, if at all possible. I mean, it is known nationwide. It is known
also as
world.
A piece of art and architecture,
Definitely.
as a symbol of architecture of the early 30s and Art
right.
Deco. There's almost nothing else like it.
That's
There is
right.
nothing else like
It's
it.
one of the...
He was so annoying. I was off camera when he was interviewing the Rockettes. Those were the women standing behind me. And all he wanted to do was flirt with those girls. And I'm standing there and I could feel the steam coming out of my ears because I thought, that's why we're here. And when I finally got up onto the stage with him, I was very serious because I wanted our point to get across, and he would have none of it. He wanted me off of there as fast as possible because I wasn't doing the flirty thing. Whatever. When we went back to the theater, we had to do the Christmas show, and I said to Bill, we have to do something right now. We cannot wait another day. This was the day after the announcement. So Bill and I called a meeting of all the employees after the first show up in the large rehearsal hall. And we got up there as fast as we could. We were the first ones up there. And we were leaning against that ballet bar facing the mirror. We were reading an article in the New York Times. And the door opened. The door is that brown rectangular thing in the right-hand corner. It had a distinctive squeak. It opened, and we didn't turn around. We just looked up into the mirror. And the first two people to walk through that door, it wasn't a rockette or a ballet dancer or a singer. It was a stagehand and a musician, both men. And I turned to Bill and I said, this is serious. And within about 15 minutes, there were about 200 people staring at me. And I don't remember the speech that I gave. The only thing I remember is how I started it. I turned around and looked at everybody, and the look in everybody's eyes was the same. And I said, we have nothing to lose. We are going to be out of here as of April 12th, so why not fight? And so it began. So it began. We quickly became organized and we formed a committee and we called ourselves the Showpeople's Committee to Save Radio City Music Hall. And the committee elected me the president. This was our poster. One of the musicians' wives was a very talented illustrator, and she did this for us. And we collected money from everybody, and we had them printed, and we plastered New York City with this poster. And whenever anybody went home to their hometown, and believe me, the people that worked at the music hall were from all over the place, take a poster, take a poster, take a poster. And soon this poster was everywhere. We wrote letters to everyone. We wrote to movie stars and Broadway stars and politicians and community leaders. We wrote to TV shows and newspapers across this country. Remember, this is all before Facebook or emails were even a dream in anyone's head. The only social media we had needed a stamp. We created a petition. And we would go out between the shows and ask the people on the line to sign the petition. The minute this was announced, the lines were around the block like the good old days. I took this picture hanging out the third floor ballet dressing room. And we had a schedule, we had our clipboards, and every single day between every single show, there were at least 4 or 5 cast members or employees on that line with those petitions asking for signatures. And now the female performers, we went out in our street clothes, but we left our stage makeup on. We didn't take that off 4 times a day. We all ran around in big dark sunglasses. It was a very intense makeup because the theater is so big and the stage is so big. If we took that off 4 times a day, we would have no skin left. So when we went out and asked for the signatures, I get it. I get it that the audience, the people on the line, they got a kick out of meeting us. I know that's fun. If I go to a show and a friend of mine is in it, or I meet somebody who's in the show, I know it makes it more fun. I get all that. I totally get that. But those people on that line had no idea what they were doing for our morale. because the morale inside that theater was horrible. We had a lot of help from a lot of people. Nobody, I'm going to repeat that word, nobody does this by themselves. The Hilton Hotel, which is just 2 blocks away from the music hall on 53rd and 6th, gave us a ground floor office for free for 3 months. Why did we need an office, you may ask? After the Christmas show, they're going to close the theater and not open it again until the Easter show. So what were we going to do? Hilton offered it to us. They didn't want it to close. Nobody in the area wanted it to close. Now, this is a shot of Bill in the office, in that office with the prototype of our sign. It's very nice that he wore the same color sweater as the sign. This office also had something we really don't think about much anymore, something called long distance. I was calling everywhere. I was calling California, and the Hilton never charged us 1 single cent. A gentleman by the name of Dr. Joseph Rosenberg wrote to us. And when I was reading this letter, it said that he had seen our poster and he hadn't been involved in helping to save Grand Central. And I said, oh my goodness, we have to talk to this man. And the committee said, yes, Rosie, you have to call him. And I'm going to make a confession to you. I was intimidated. I kept looking at his name, Dr. Joseph Rosenberg. He's going to get a call from Rosie Novellino, ballet dancer. This is going to go well. Okay. But he put his phone number on the letter. And so I called him. He answered on the first ring. I'll never forget that. I didn't even have a chance to prepare. And one of the nicest, sweetest men besides my darling Bill answered the phone. This is a picture of Dr. Joseph Rosenberg. He was so patient. He let me ask him so many questions. We must have talked for almost a half an hour. And then I asked him a really biggie. We had just started the landmarking thing. And I said, would you mind coming in and advising the committee, advising us on what to do with this landmarking? And you know what he said to a total stranger? He said, tell me where and when, and I'll be there. Wow. And 2 days later, he was standing in front of Bill and me. And the only place we could fit, the committee was like 35 to 40 people, fit everybody, was in the musicians' quarters in the basement of the theater. So we snuck Joe in. God bless the doorman, he turned his head. He knew what we were doing. And if Joe hadn't come in and told us what he told us about landmarking, honestly, folks, I don't know if the theater would still be there. And I say Joe because Joe and his wife Norma and Bill and I are still very, very, very close friends. We see each other all the time. I love you, Joe Rosenberg. I did several other TV shows and radio shows around the city, all the local stuff besides Bill Boggs. Do you remember the Joe Franklin show? He was very enthusiastic about helping us. And I did this show with Joyce Dwyer. Joyce was the captain of the Rockettes, and Joyce and I had a wonderful time on his show. And then after this, a couple of days later at home, I got a phone call from him, and he asked me if I would do his radio show the following Saturday. So of course I said yes. And Bill and I went over there and did it. And the radio show was completely different. It was hard hitting. He asked all kinds of questions about the Rockefellers and Rockefeller Center and all this stuff. It was a wonderful interview. We will always be grateful for the help that Joe Franklin gave us in trying to save our beloved music hall. I was on the radio also a lot. Do you remember Art Athens? He was a big deal on WCBS radio. Oh my God. I have been saying for about 47 years, Joe Rosenberg and Art Athens were two angels that flew down and landed in front of us. Both of them in their own departments were confidants, coaches, friends. Art told us when to do a publicity stunt, what time, what day. He was wonderful, unbelievable help. Could not have done half of what we did without his coaching and pushing. And when Bill and I found out that a couple years ago, just before I finished the book, he had passed away from cancer, we were truly upset by that. What a man. And then I was invited to fly out to California to do, remember Tom Snyder's Tomorrow Show? We were to the moon when we got this invitation. And I was going to appear on the show with Ron Hokoff. Ron was another very strong member of our committee and a singer with Bill. And then Ron and I freaked out. We got really, really nervous. And we talked about this all the way out on that plane trip. We felt like we had the responsibility of 400 employees on our shoulders because this was going to be our first national TV show.
We have with us tonight two members of the Showpeople's Committee to Save Radio City Music Hall, and they will detail their efforts for us tonight on how they're going. You two are facing some very, very stiff competition. You have the Rockefeller Center people who say that it's been losing money for a long, long time. You have the motion picture people who say they can't supply the kinds of product that is necessary to keep that place going with family trade. How do you buck that kind of competition against you?
Well, I think if we can make everybody realize how important the music hall is. It's an institution. It's the only one of its kind in this country. And I feel, and the committee feels, that the music hall is, as I said before, an institution. The Rockettes are an art form. It's an American art form. And we've been chopping away at so many things in this country, and especially in New York, which I love. But if we keep chopping, there's not going to be anything left. And, well, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I think it's a crime. If they let the music hall close, it is over. It is gone. They will not build another Radio City Music Hall. There will not be another line called the Rockettes. They own the name. And so many people have grown up going to music hall. I did. I went there as a child. My parents took me. That was the first time I saw live entertainment.
We have Rockettes and ballet girls down in blizzards with petitions. How many signatures do we have now?
We have over 70,000 signatures on petitions.
And that's petitions for what?
To keep the music hall open.
And who do they go to?
We are bringing them to the landmark hearing.
Mm-hmm. Well, the landmark hearing is coming up in March.
March 14th.
March 14th. We shall report back. I hope that this has helped get the word out. And for
so.
all those people who do not live in New York, who have been to that city and have been to the music hall and know what it is, now you know what's going to happen if somebody doesn't do something. Thanks for making the trek out. I hope it turns out to have been well worth your while.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary. Thank you, Ron.
He was fantastic. That was just a clip, but he gave us the whole show. And after the first commercial, he could tell how nervous Ron and I were, and he just completely calmed us down. He was absolutely charming. And a couple of very good things happened because of that show. But just before we went out there, it had become crystal clear to us that Rockefeller Center was vehemently against saving the music hall. We caused publicity stunts constantly to keep our fight on the news and in the minds of the public. We quickly realized that if the public kept seeing us, then our issue would not be forgotten. I really did not want to become yesterday's news. And this was one of our better efforts at getting news media attention.
Thanks for signing our petition. We're not giving up our fight. That's why we have suits of armor on.
The Rockettes and other performers took to the sidewalk to collect signatures from the weekend crowds waiting to get in. They did this between performances, and they collected quite a few names.
Today, the performers who work inside the music hall were outside, in costume, getting signatures on petitions.
We're the Showpeople's Committee to Save Music Hall, and we think it's a shame if they close this great place. It's an American institution. Why close it?
We are not giving up the fight to save Radio City Music Hall, even though it is going to close on April 12th. We're still going to be in there fighting. We still want people to write and sign the petition, and let's keep this place open.
Hoping that some 11th hour miracle will stop the closing, the workers had a lot of support from their public.
Do you think that's important, ma'am?
Well, I certainly do. I think it's a disgrace. This place is a landmark. I've been here since I was a little girl. I think it's terrible.
The performers hope to pressure the state and federal government for additional support to keep the music hall operating.
This stunt really made the music hall mad at us. Ay, mamma mia. They were livid about this. If we have time during Q&A, I'll be more than glad to tell you why they were so mad and why we were wearing armor. You just might be surprised. Now, some of the politicians were completely against what we were trying to do. I guess it all depended on which way the political wind was blowing. That certainly hasn't changed. As a matter of fact, our dear sweet mayor, who we thought was in our corner, completely changed his tune.
I'm not in a position to compel a businessman to stay open and lose $3 million a year.
I am not defending him by any means. I was not a fan. But many years later, we found out that he was getting a lot of pressure from the Rockefellers to not support saving the music hall. This is exactly what we were up against. Every time we thought we had made a positive move forward in the right direction, someone of importance would come along and try to push us right back down where they thought we belonged, and I would have none of it. Marianne Krupsak, she was the lieutenant governor at the time under Governor Hugh Carey. His term was just about up. Well, she started to pay attention to us after we did a few of these TV appearances because of all the publicity we were causing and the theatrical nature of our issue. The press gave us a lot of attention. We were on the news a lot. And Marianne Krupsak attached herself to our bandwagon. She contacted us and soon became our political champion in the fight to save the music hall. We unfortunately needed a politician on our side. We were fighting politicians. There were many celebrities that offered to help us. And the first to step up was Chita Rivera. She came over and with Bill and all the male singers, she stood under the marquee. Bill had changed the lyrics to "You Gotta Have Heart" from Damn Yankees. He changed the lyrics so it fit our issue. And there was Cheetah completely surrounded by men singing that song under the marquee. It was terrific, and we will always be grateful for her help. We got a beautiful letter from Phyllis Diller out in California. And she said that we could use her name in anything that we needed if it would help to open a door or help to save that building. It was a beautiful letter from a beautiful woman. The Oscar, and we did use her name, the Oscar-winning actor Cliff Robertson. Oh my God, what a nice guy he was. He was willing to do anything we asked him to do, including trying to sing, and he sang about as well as I sang, which is not very good, but what a good sport. Now, his wife, to be just a little catty here, his wife, Dina Merrill, the actress, she was not happy that he was helping us out. Oh, no, she was livid, but he didn't care. He just kept coming over and helping us. He was terrific. But the star that helped us the most was the beautiful movie star Arlene Dahl. We were actually invited to her apartment to discuss what she could do for us. And I remember it was a freezing cold night. She lived on the East Side in the 60s. And we were a little nervous, but we wanted to be, sophisticated and calm. And it was one of those where you open the elevator and there was only one door. I mean, the elevator opened and there was only one door. And we rang the bell, standing there all composed. And the door opened, and I lost my breath. I couldn't believe what, I mean, she was so gorgeous. I don't know what poor Bill was going through, but I couldn't even breathe. Just movie star. And she couldn't have been nicer. She treated us like long lost friends. She was so charming. We were there for several hours. She did all the serving. We had wine and cheese and all this stuff. And she was very smart. And because of her connections and her efforts, she got me booked on Good Morning America for the very morning of the landmark hearing. That was her idea. Unfortunately, 2 years ago, she passed away, but she was still around and well when the book came out, and I was made sure I found her. I signed the book and sent it to her with a big thank you note. And after I got booked on Good Morning America, a couple of days later, ABC called me at home, and they said, "Do you think you could get Marian Krupsak to be on the show with you?" I didn't say this to them, but my mental thought was, she's a politician. Why wouldn't she want to be on television? So I called Marianne, and of course she said yes. And so on March 14th at 8 a.m. in the morning, we did this outside under the marquee. You can't see them, but there's also a lot of Rockettes behind. At the end of this, we all got into a kick line and did a kick line outside. It was a good thing. And then right after this, the same morning, we literally turned around and went across the street down into the subway hall because we had to get down to City Hall for the landmark hearing. Now, this was another good publicity stunt we did. About a week or so before the landmark hearing, we were brainstorming. How are we going to get the press to pay attention to us? And my head exploded. And I went, oh, for Pete's sake, we'll get the Rockettes to do an impromptu kick line on the steps of City Hall. So I went flying across to the other side of the theater. The Ballet's dressing room were on the 50th Street side of the building. The Rockettes lived on 51st Street side. So I skittered across the stage and went up to their dressing room and I said, hey guys, how about we do this? And of course, everybody was on board. Great, fabulous. And then Bill and I went up to the costume department and we asked Penny and Leanne, the two women that ran the costume shop, can you make sashes a la Miss America, you know, and put Rockette on it so that the Rockettes can wear this over the street clothes? And of course they said yes. And then I remember it was the Easter show. We were doing the Easter show and I got into my Easter costume, pageant costume, and I flew down to the musicians' headquarters and I said, please, can some of you come and play on the steps so that the Rockettes have some music to dance to? And of course they said yes. And so this was our impromptu wink, wink kick line on the steps of City Hall.
This could be one of the Rockettes' last performances. It was choreographed to precision. On this bleak March morning on the steps of City Hall, they helped launch one of the most intensive lobbying efforts the City Landmarks Commission has ever seen, the fight to save Radio City Music Hall.
When we got inside, Alton Marshall was one of the first to speak.
Hundreds of people want to save Radio City. Before the Landmarks Commission, they were arguing that the music hall be made a landmark. That would put legal hurdles in the way of any sale or change. Legal hurdles that Rockefeller Center's president says is just what the music hall doesn't need.
Landmark designation will bring about another negative accomplishment. It will leave me no choice but to apply for a permit to demolish the structure the day after such designation goes into effect, so that at the end of 305 days, I will be free to act.
I don't like him. I spoke about an hour after him, and after my speech is when we presented the signatures, the petitions. Bill and one of the male singers, Tommy Healy, presented them quite dramatically. And at this point, we had over, and I'm not exaggerating, 150,000 handwritten signatures, not like today where we press a button on a computer. Handwritten signatures from all over the world, 150,000. And this had a major effect on the landmarking. That was March 14th. 2 weeks later, on March 28th, I got a phone call in the ballet dressing room, and it was Joe Rosenberg and Art Athens yelling into the same phone because they wanted me to be the first to know that the Landmark Commission had designated the interior of the music hall a city landmark. Now, that little red circle is way too small, so Bill's going to blow it up for you because it says, Koch is delighted. Oh, give me a break. Make up your mind. Anyway, this city landmark would give the theater a 361-day reprieve. The next step would be to have it designated a National Historic Landmark, and then it would be saved forever. But the doors were still going to close on April 12th. So we continued to pull publicity stunts so we could keep it in the eyes of the public. The landmarking alone was not going to keep the doors open. And we desperately wanted to make sure it did not close and it remained an active landmark theater. And now the closing date of April 12th was upon us. And I'll tell you, it was one of the hardest days for Bill and me to get through in all of our lifetime together. And the day started with everybody in their apartments watching the Today Show. They did the second hour from 8 to 9 on the stage of the music hall.
Our live NBC News minicam this morning is inside Radio City Music Hall here at Rockefeller Center. You may never see these scenes again because this is the day that is the scheduled closing of Radio City Music Hall by Rockefeller Center, Inc.
This show, this Today Show, it was a fiasco. It started off all sweet and charming with two Rockettes and Gene Shalit. Remember Gene Shalit with all his hair? I'll introduce the two Rockettes. The blonde is Carol Harbick. The brunette is Joyce Dwyer, who I did the Joe Franklin show with. This was charming. It was funny. It was fun. It was fabulous. And then the show turned into a political war live on television. We have it all on tape. And it was a complete embarrassment what was going on. We couldn't believe it. Bill and I were in our own apartments. We were watching it together over the telephone. And all we could say to each other was, we are doomed. We're doomed. And we all went to work and tried to get through the day. It was on television all day long. That's how big a deal it was here. And now it was time to do that last show. And the music hall had done a good thing, believe it or not. They had decided to make the last show a charity benefit for the Variety Club Foundation of New York. It was a charity for children. That's very nice. And then they did something not so bright. They hired Stanley Siegel. He was a TV personality at the time, to MC the beginning of the show. And Stanley Siegel didn't do his homework. And the show started with this wonderful black and white newsreel from the 1930s. It was the opening night. It was about the beginning of the Rockettes. We were all backstage straining our necks trying to see this thing. I had never seen it before. I've never seen it since. And he was out there on our stage giving wrong information. And we really wanted to strangle him. And then it was time to actually start the show. Now, the show was the Easter show. I don't know how many of you have ever seen the Easter pageant. It's very solemn. The Easter pageant is classical music. It was composed by Anton Rubinstein. The singing is operatic. The set is a cathedral. It's religious in nature. We make a cross at the end. It is very solemn. And the minute the curtain went up on this thing, all we heard on stage was, "Don't close, don't go." It was horrible. None of us looked at each other on stage. Nobody made eye contact because we knew if we did, we would have burst into tears and that would have been the end of it. We had a show to do. And to say it was a little tense backstage is putting it mildly. The tension wasn't bouncing off the walls. It was crashing up against the walls. People were bickering and crying and fighting. It was like you couldn't breathe back there. The air was so thick with tension. I've never experienced anything like that in my life, and I never want to experience it again. It was horrible. And the poor Rockettes, I very rarely say poor Rockettes. I say that because in this Easter show, the number that they were doing finished, it ended on the passerelle. The passerelle is an extension of the stage. It comes out around the outside of the orchestra pit. And when you're on the passerelle, I was on it many, many, many times. It is really close to the audience. It is touching close to the audience. And when the women finished, 6,000 people jumped to their feet, screaming bravo, throwing flowers at them. And as the flowers were cascading over their heads, tears were pouring down their faces.
You might be the last people to see this show the way it is.
The capacity crowd of 6,000 seemed unwilling to accept that this show could be the last for the music hall and for the Rockettes and the singers and stagehands and costumers. The crowd cheered and applauded throughout the performance, and even as spectators stood for a final ovation, late negotiations continued between the state and city and Rockefeller Center, the owner of the music hall, whose managers insisted the landmark had to be closed because of multi-million-dollar losses.
Now, this was actually the finale of that show. And at this point, the theater was 46 years old, and they had never done curtain calls. It just wasn't done at the music hall. But thanks to our stage managers, Frank Hawkins and George Court, they made this last for us for a full 10 minutes. It's still hard to watch. When the curtain came down, we still had no idea of the outcome. But we had decided to go out in style, and we were going to get all glammed up and have a party at the Rainbow Room. We couldn't afford the big one, the one on the top, but the one right under it, the Rainbow Grill, I think it was called, they gave us a deal. And we were going to get all dressed up and have a party. And it was either going to be a celebration or a wake. We did not know at this point. But during that last show, when I was backstage, the head stage manager, Frank Hawkins, came up to me and handed me a piece of paper. And he said, "Rosie, take this. You may need this tonight." And I said, "What is it?" And he said, "It's John Jackson's phone number." He was the vice president. I don't know why Frank was giving me this, but I stuck it in my costume somewhere. And then when I got all glammed up for the party, I didn't put it in my evening bag. I stuck it in the bosom of my gown. I thought I better keep this close just in case. And Bill and I went to the party. And at exactly 11:50, 10 minutes to midnight, a gentleman from the Rainbow Room came running over to me and he said, "You're supposed to call John Jackson right now. I'm supposed to tell you to call John Jackson right now." And that got me all like nuts. And I thought, okay, I'll call him, but I didn't know where to go. Where's the phone? We didn't have cell phones in 1978. So this gentleman escorted me to the hall, to a wooden phone booth, and I sat down and realized I ran out of there so fast I didn't take my bag. And I looked at him and I said, "I don't have any money." And he went into his tuxedo pocket and handed me a dime. God bless that dime. And I made the call and I flew back into the party to make this announcement.
My name is Rosemary Novellino.
What did you find out?
I called the Vice President's office, John Jackson. I spoke to Music Hall's attorney, Alan Jaffe. He said, "Tell everyone we're in business to report to work tomorrow. Music Hall has been saved." I ran to the phone and called one of our vice presidents, John Jackson. He spoke to me briefly for a second and put me on the phone with Music Hall's attorney, Alan Jaffe. And Alan Jaffe said, "Tell everyone the musical has been saved and to report to work tomorrow." And I said, "Thank you." And I got off the phone and ran back in here. It's just, I can't believe it.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, this major David and Goliath accomplishment was all done in 3 months. But that's not the end of the story. The end of the story is a bit bittersweet, but it is the end of our presentation. And I thank you for attending, for your attention. Please visit our website, savingradiocitymusichall.com. And we have an email, which is the same, savingradiocitymusichall@gmail. If you have any questions, you want to talk to me, I'll be more than glad to answer them or to talk to you. Thank you so much. And let's go back to our friends.
Sounds good.
Ta-da!
Thank you, Rosie. We're going to turn the floor over to Melissa to take everyone's questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm going to turn the camera. I'm going to turn the camera around so you can see Bill, so we can answer them together if there's a question. I can.
Well, thank you so much. We do have some questions that have come in, and I would encourage everyone to add your questions to that Q&A at the bottom if you have any more. But we'll get started here. One quick one here, just in case you happen to know, was 1974 the year that they reduced the onstage Rockette line to 30 women? Quick trivia.
No. Well, that was the year they got rid of the ballet. Yes, it was somewhere around there. I don't know if it was exactly 74. It may have been the next year or year after. When you first worked there,
it was 36 when I was first there, and I started in 74. So my guess is it was probably 75 or 6.
Right, because it was originally 36 and they fit wing to wing. And Russell did that on purpose and they cut it down to 30 now to save money.
Great. Well, thank you for that. So where are all of those glorious costumes, scenery, etc., everything you showed us, where are those stored today?
That's what I'd like to know. They used to have a storage unit. One was way up in Harlem, and then there was one in New Jersey where they stored scenery and all that kind of stuff. And I hate to say this, but I think they're gone. When I was writing the book, I needed to talk to the archivist. And through a Rockette that I met through Facebook, Belle, she connected me with the president of the Rockette alumni, who connected me with the archivist. And I didn't know any of these people. They were so helpful. They were so wonderful. And so we made an appointment. My publisher, Bill, and I went to Madison Square Garden, because that's who runs the music hall now. We went upstairs and we met this very young lady. She was very sweet, but she looked so young. And we told her we, wanted to go into the archives and blah, 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 blah. And she said, "You can't. excuse me? And she said, only the people that work at the music hall now can go into the archive or work at Madison Square Garden. Nobody else can go into the archives. Okay. And I was really stumped with this. So was my publisher. I do not understand why you would have an archive if you treated it like this. Now, since then, I have talked to some other Rockettes that I met at Rockette alumni. Unfortunately, a lot of people think they tossed them. They're gone. And I think a lot of the archives, programs, all that stuff, posters, scenery, props from way back, I don't think, I'm afraid to find out where it is. I don't think they have it. I find that very sad, very sad. I went on a little long with that answer, but.
Well, it's appreciated. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
So with the settlement, who actually became the legal owner of the music hall?
It's still owned by Rockefeller Center, but it's run by Madison Square Garden now. It's doing well. It's doing very well. It's not, I would love for it to go back to the way it was with movies and stage shows. That's not going to happen. But the Christmas show, as you all know, is a huge, huge hit. It's a real moneymaker for them. And the rest of the year, it's a concert hall. Yeah. People appear there. Barry Manilow, all these people appear there. They're going to do the Tony Awards there this year. Again, they're back. They were there for a while, and then somebody got mad at somebody, and they went someplace else. But it's used for all that kind of stuff. I don't know anything about football, but I think they do, what is that called? When they pick the football players for the
drafts?
That's it. Thank you very much.
I don't know anything about football.
Yeah. But they rent the music hall for that. They rent it for all kinds of, they rent it for graduations. A good friend of ours, her son graduated from NYU, and the ceremony was on the stage of the music hall. So they rent it out for a great deal of money. So they're doing well. They're making money. It's fine. As long as it's alive and it's doing well, and it looks beautiful. It's clean, and it was redone. And because of us, I get a kick out of this. They had to get the same carpet, the same wall covering. Everything had to be exactly the same because it's a landmark. Yeah.
I don't know. Do you know if the property actually had any special tax benefits as a means of improving the economics of running a site like that?
That I don't. I do know that Columbia University owned the land, and there was a 99-year lease on the music hall when it was built. It was actually given to Nelson Rockefeller for his 18th birthday. Now, the music hall is 97 years old. So there's 2 more years, and I don't know what's going to happen with that. I don't know the ins and outs anymore about what they're going to do when it reaches 99 years. But Columbia was the one who owned that land. If that's the same story, I don't know. You haven't heard anything about that?
Do you know what the function of the building above the hall was, both originally and presently?
The building above, you mean their
offices?
The offices right in the front on 6th Avenue, those are just offices. That is not, it looks like it's attached to the music hall because it's next to it. It's on the front on 6th Avenue. But I don't think it's just offices. That's all that's there. But everything else, if you walk 3 feet into 50th Street, it's just the theater. That takes up, it takes up the whole area, almost that whole block. Yeah, it's a huge. When you're backstage and the space that it had and all the things, all the functions that it did back there, it was so much more than just the theater. The theater is the magnificent part, but all that stuff I explained, it went on and on and on. It had all kinds of stuff in there.
Well, yeah, it's the behind the scenes sections that pieces that people don't even notice.
Yeah.
Well, this is getting back into the beginning here, but can you tell us a little more about how the band car actually moved?
Yeah. I like this.
Oh, yes, I know. I know.
Okay. So
If I can see if I can get that.
see if you can get the picture. When it sits on the floor, there's a floor for the orchestra pit, and the band car is a separate thing on the floor of the. In the back of the band car, there, if you're facing it, it would be on stage right. There's an opening on the bottom, on the floor, and the way this works is it comes up. There are tracks on either side of the stage. They look like inverted train tracks. And the band car has metal wheels on it. And it lines up to these tracks. And this opening on the bottom in the back, the smallest stagehand, the shortest stagehand, and when we were there, it was Bumpy was his nickname. He would crawl in there with a walkie-talkie. They had a mattress in there for him to lay on his stomach. And he would talk to the stage manager. So it would come up, and at a certain point, Bumpy had to unplug and plug in something else. And so he would be talking to the stage managers, and then he would drive it onto the stage. Well, one time, I guess Bumpy had a full night, and he fell asleep. And then just sat there, and the stage managers were having a complete cow backstage. But that's how it moves. You need somebody small. A great big 6-footer could not fit in there. And that's how that moves. Isn't that wild? That's it. So they can't see me, but you see where the harp is? Behind the harp, that's where the opening is. And he'd have to go down to the basement before the show started and get in there. So he's got to be in there for the whole show. So if the band car doesn't move until after the overture and maybe after the ballet, and then it's going to move for a special effect before the Rockette. So he's in there for a long time. And the poor guy, he was a sweet guy.
I could just say I wouldn't want that job.
No, I wouldn't want that job either. No. That only happened once the whole time I was there. I don't think once that happens to you, that never is going to happen again. But that's how it moves. And then to get it back, okay, so it moves back all the way, let's say to the third elevator, show over, yay, curtain comes down. They have to lower the third elevator. They have to lower all the elevators. And then they drive it back onto underneath, back onto the orchestra pit, and it comes up again. Get it?
Okay.
Quite a feat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So I think we have time for just one more before we're gonna have to wrap this up. But I'd like to hear more about that stunt with the armor. Actually, what would happen in the aftermath?
Okay.
With the musical.
All right. I'll try to give you this as briefly as I can. When we were doing all the publicity stunts and all that stuff, the Easter show that we were doing, the ballet, one of the numbers that the ballet did, we were in these great big rabbit costumes. I don't think you have a picture of the rabbit costume.
No. Well, that's the
big.
costume.
I mean, we were full. They were adorable. They were a pain to wear because they were very big, beautiful faces, big eyes, funny rabbit costumes. And I was sitting in the dressing room one time and I thought, oh my God, wouldn't it be funny if we went out and asked for the petitions in the rabbit costumes? So I needed to get permission for this. So I made an appointment to see the head of publicity. And she was already ticked off at me, and I had no respect for this woman at all. I thought she was terrible at her job. And so I went up and had a meeting with her, and I said, Pat, we were thinking about doing this, and I want to know if we could do it with the rabbit. No. And I said, I didn't finish my sentence, and I tried to say it again. She said, no. I said, can I at least finish my sentence, please? And I finally got rabbit costumes out of my mouth. And she said, absolutely not. What if something happened and they got dirty? Which, of course, she was right. But I left. I was dejected. And I came back to the dressing room and I was just like, oh, well, that one didn't work. And my brother and his wife had my brother was a scenic sculptor. And he did sculptures for Broadway and opera and ballet and all that stuff. And the company was called Costume Armor. They made armor for like Man of La Mancha and all that. And my brother's name was Nino, and he called me every day to find out how we were doing. And he called the dressing room. They knew when the breaks were. And I said, oh, this didn't work. I wanted to do the rabbit thing. I thought that would be so funny. And he listened to me. We hung up. 10 minutes later, his wife, Mary, called me, and she said, I have an idea. I said, what? She said, what if we send you suits of armor? I went, what? She said, we'll send you armor, the plastic armor, and we'll send you all different kinds, and then you can go out there in the armor. And I thought, oh my God, that's even better. So she said, okay, well, the only way, she called me back, she said, the only way we can do this is to have it sent by bus. Their shop was up near Newburgh, to Port Authority. So you need somebody to help you pick it up. I said, okay, don't worry about it. Send it. So one of the musicians had a car, and he said, I'll help you. So we go, Bill and I with this guy, and we go to Port Authority trying to find where this armor, we finally found it. This was on a break between the shows, and there was boxes and boxes and boxes, and he had a little foreign car. There was stuff sticking out of his car. We packed it on the top. As we drove back to the musical, we started to laugh. We felt like we were the Beverly Hillbillies. You know how that thing started. And he said, I don't care who you give the armor to, but there's a full suit of white armor. That's for Bill. And he gave us fancy breastplates for the Rockettes, women's armor. And so I told everybody to come over the next day, and we unwrapped everything, and I gave everybody armor. And Art Athens said, do it on a Sunday or a Monday. That's a slow news day, and tell the AP. And I did everything Art said, finished our show, went upstairs to get into our armor, and the doorman was already calling. He said, Rosie, there's press out here. They're waiting for you. I hadn't even out of my costume yet, my music hall costume. And we finally got all dressed and went down, and there was, the 50th Street was lined with press. And that shot that they showed us being interviewed, Bill and I remember talking with the microphone in my face, talking, and there was a door, an executive door halfway down 50th Street. And that woman, Pat Robert, who was head of publicity, who said no to me, she happened to come out the door. She didn't know this was going on. And she came out, I was being interviewed, and our eyes met, and it felt like one of the cartoons, you know, like when the eyeballs go, and she glared at me. And I thought, I'm not in a rabbit suit, I'm in armor. And she went across the street to Whalen's to get coffee, and I thought, I'm doomed. I just put a nail in my coffin, ba-boom, ba-boom. And that's exactly what happened. And it was a better publicity stunt than if we had used the rabbit stuff. And she was right. If we got anything on it, it got dirty. That was, you know, unacceptable. You don't walk out of in the costume. But the armor was fabulous. And, you know, Mary were our heroes that day.
Well, that's a fantastic story to end with. So thank you for that. And thank you for all of this tonight.
Oh, well, thank you for inviting us. We had a great time doing this. It was just great. And I know there were some people tonight watching that were part of this. So I hope they enjoyed walking down memory lane with us.
Yes, thank you to everyone who added to the chat and shared their own personal stories, along with Rosie's and Bill's. Again, thank you to them. Thank you to our audience for joining us for our special Women's History Month presentation. To learn more information about the second edition release of Saving Radio City Music Hall, A Dancer's True Story, please visit savingradiocitymusichall.com. And for more information about our upcoming events, including our 3 upcoming Lunch and Learns next month, please sign up for our mailing list. Thank you again for joining us tonight. Hope you enjoyed it.